Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome all of you to this session today on crowding in private finance. This particular topic, as many of you will know, crowding in private finance, which we will now discuss during this session, has in fact I would say quite a long history already and quite a bit of a transition already under previous calls, but it is also open this year for new proposals under the 2024 call of the Life CET, the Life Clean Energy Transition Subprogram. My name is Björn Zapfer, and I have the pleasure to guide you now through this session. But what can you expect during the next around a little bit more than 1 hour? And maybe the agenda can be shown on the screen in this context. Now, what can you expect? What you can expect is that we have a number of speakers. And first of all, we are extremely happy to have Carlos Sanchez Rivero here with us. He's a team leader in DG Energy, and he will set the scene by providing the policy background on the topic we are discussing today. So what is the policy background on, the intention to crowd in more private finance, specifically concerning sustainable energy and energy efficiency investments in particular? Then my colleagues Adrien Boulier and Michele Sansoni will follow up on this introduction, and on this basis, they will then introduce the details of the topic, crowding in private finance, and what are the related expectations in this context from potential new proposals. Based on this, I would say more theoretical introduction, we will then have the pleasure also to listen to Monica Ardeleanu, who is the research director at the Romanian Green Building Council. And she has developed and implemented on the ground a concrete, innovative financing project, namely Smarter for EU. And she will provide in this context a number of practical insights on what it means to really conceive on the one hand, but on the other hand, also to implement such a project on the ground, and potentially also some challenges in this context. And last but not least, as you can see on the slide, we will also still have time for a Q&A at the end of the session based on your questions, your particular questions, which we invite you to pose right from now in Slido. In this context, a few practical issues and a few practical points. So as I've mentioned, you can pose all of your questions directly during the session right from now through Slido at the website www.slido.com with the event code slash or hashtag EULive24. What is important that you select the correct room in this context, which is the room corresponding to our session, session 5, and you can find it then at the top right corner of the screen, which opens. Yeah. Also, to avoid duplication of any questions, you will have there the opportunity to vote for questions that you find already reflecting your specific interests in a very good way, and also your needs for clarifications. Now I think it's time for me to stop here, so you don't want to hear me speaking, but of course the interesting presentations. Let's get started. Carlos, would you like to take the floor to provide the policy background for the topic on crowdfunding in private finance?
Of course, thanks a lot, Bjorn, and good afternoon. It is my real pleasure to participate today with you on the live 2024 Info Days, and in particular on the PrivaFin topic. And it's really a very important topic considering the energy efficiency policy context, where a very strong legislative framework has been introduced, and it is time now for implementation. It's time for supporting actions that will allow the EU to deliver on their energy efficiency objectives. But please let me give you some details on the latest developments in European energy efficiency policy. As you know, the European Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package set the ambition to turn the EU into the first climate neutral territory by 2050. This is done. This is to be done by greater use of renewable energy sources and by boosting energy efficiency, among others. And this is why the Fit for 55 package included the revision of key energy legislation, including the revised Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and finally the Energy Efficiency Directive, which in fact entered into force on the 10th of October 2023. So go to the next slide, please. Here you can see the main elements that are included in the ED recast. First, it raised the level of ambition of the EU with an EU energy efficiency target that represents a reduction of 11.7% in energy consumption by 2030 when we compare it to the EU reference scenario for 2020, and also establish indicative national contributions to ensure that the EU level target is met. Also, the revised directive almost double in average the annual energy savings obligation from Article 8 for the period 24 to 2030 compared to the previous period. Another important aspect is the reinforcement of the energy efficiency first principle, with the goal of having it reflected in all policy planning and major investment decisions, including on public procurement. Additionally, the directive continues to underline the relevance of the exemplary role of the public sector in achieving more energy efficiency. And it includes now the obligation to renovate the public building stock at a rate of 3% per year, and that applying to national, regional, and local levels. Finally, the EED further highlights the need for just transition, with a specific focus on energy poverty and consumer empowerment. If we move now to the next slide, please. The revised Energy Performance of Buildings Directive was adopted by the Council very recently, only 2 weeks ago, on the 12th of April of 2024. And it has 4 focus areas: renovation, the decarbonization of the building stock, with provisions for all new buildings to be zero-emission buildings from 2028 for the public sector and from 2030 for all buildings, information, financing, and overall support framework that includes energy performance certificates, enhancement, renovation passports, provisions on one-stop shops, etc. Third main focused area is the modernization and system integration, for instance, provisions on infrastructure for sustainable mobility. And as I mentioned at the beginning, very significant provisions as regards building renovation. In that sense, it includes minimum energy performance standards, it's called MEPS, for the non-residential sector. That means that by 2030, there is an obligation to renovate the 16% of the worst performing buildings, and by 2033, 16% of the worst performing buildings. While for the residential building, what it is introduced is a national trajectory to reduce the average primary energy used of the building stock by 16 by 2030, and interval between 20 and 22 by 2035, when this compared to 2020, where at least 55% of those savings need to come or need to be reached in worst performing buildings. So please, next slide. So these provisions and objectives translates in the need to mobilize investments at a larger scale. And this is why I would like to focus on the Article 30, on the Energy Efficiency Directive, and on the specific new financing obligations that are included in it. As public financing alone, including the EU funding and the national funding, will not be able to meet the investment needs for our energy transition, increasing the uptake of private investments is fundamental. So in particular, Article 30 aims to, first of all, facilitate the establishment of financing facilities, increase access to finance, and provide project development assistance to mobilize investments in energy efficiency in the different sectors. Second, to promote energy efficiency lending products, such as green mortgages and loans, and also other innovative financing schemes, by ensuring a wide and non-discriminatory offer of such products in the market. Member states shall adopt measures to facilitate the implementation of on-bill and on-tax financing schemes and the development of other innovative financing schemes. This is an element, of course, as you have may seen already, obviously, at the core of the pre-offering topic. I will come back to it later during my intervention. Finally, to strengthen cooperation and dialogue with private and public financial institutions to mobilize these private investments that are needed in energy efficiency measures and energy renovations. So it is related to this last point that the Commission has developed a new initiative that was launched this Monday to create a framework for this dialogue between member states, the Commission, and financial institutions. So this is the European Energy Efficiency Financing Coalition. Please, next slide. So the overreaching objective of the coalition is to mobilize private financing for energy efficiency at a scale. Its focus is on the implementation and helping member states achieve their energy efficiency targets and national contributions. Among other possible deliverables, the objective is to find also solutions to make better use of public resources and private financing, increase blended public funding options, and explore demand activation solutions. To achieve this, the Commission proposed three different levels of cooperation. First layer, with a high-level participation from member states, the Commission, and financial institutions. This will approve the mandate and deliverables of the coalition. Second layer, with an expert group to provide the technical expertise for the completion of the task of the coalition. This will build on the expertise, experience, and know-how of the previous EFIC group. And the third layer is the coalition presence at national level, the national hubs, where we envisage that action on the ground will be taken. So we'll go now to the next slide, please. Let me now give you an overview on how the EU budget is supporting the implementation of the very strong regulatory framework for energy efficiency that I've referred in my previous slides. Out of the total 1,800 billion euros that was the package that was agreed by the EU, corresponding to the multi-annual financial framework 21-27 and the recovery package. 30% of all these resources, that are around 550 billion, have been earmarked for climate action. This means that the resources dedicated to climate action have more than doubled compared with the period 2014-2020. And energy efficiency plays a central role in this regard. In fact, when it comes to energy efficiency financing, we see an unprecedented increase of EU and public funds, in particular for building renovation in the period 21-27. In total, the multiplication factor is at least of 3.5 times compared to the previous programming period. In that context, a swift implementation is fundamental, where member states have a central role. Next slide. So to conclude my presentation, let me present you some final important considerations on energy efficiency financing. Currently, we estimate an annual investment need of around 300 billion euros per year to achieve the 2030 energy efficiency target, with an investment gap of at least 165 billion euros per year. Putting it in context, this represents approximately 1% of the EU GDP. The lion's share of this gap corresponds to the building sector. I've just mentioned that public support for energy efficiency and building renovation has very significantly increased in the last years. But at the same time, public financing alone will not be able to meet the investment needs for our energy transition. It is estimated that the total public funding in the EU can only amount to 10 to 20% of this effort. Public funding can be the catalyst, but it cannot address the challenge by itself. It is not even close. Therefore, increasing the uptake of private investments is fundamental. There is the need to maximize the impact of the EU and the national public support for energy efficiency by making the most cost-effective use of public resources to leverage private investments. And it is in this context where the pre-offering topic takes on particular importance. Focused on demand is very important. At the end, one of the major challenges that we have is that we need to trigger millions of investment decisions by citizens, by enterprises, where public funding can only cover a small proportion of the cost. There is an economic case, as energy efficiency pays back, but still in most of the cases, incentives are needed. There is a need to offer solutions to citizens, to enterprises that are adequate, simple, and comprehensive, and that eventually will lead to create this demand. We need to develop innovative solutions because the predominant grant-based public schemes with very high rates of public support are no longer compatible with the scale of investment needed. Targeted grant-based support should be left for those most in need to provide social safeguards to vulnerable low-income households and also to the most complex projects with a difficult economic case. We should focus on developing comprehensive and innovative financing frameworks, removing upfront costs and linking them to any performance, to any savings, through an appropriate combination of financial instruments, grants, and technical assistance. They will facilitate an efficient and effective use of public resources to contribute to the achievement of the EU energy efficiency target and objectives. I'm confident that the briefing call would offer effective solutions to address these challenges. Many thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Carlos. I think extremely interesting and also very good as a scene setting for what we are talking about today. I think extremely interesting and also a bit overwhelming even though all of us, we know that already, but to see it here in one figure is this 18 to 90%, 80 to 90% of private finance, which we really need quite quickly. I mean, 2030 is just around the corner, more or less. And that's the importance of the topic together with some others that we are talking about today. You mentioned also technical assistance, which is mentioned later on during the day. But of course, crowding in private finance has it already in the title, no? Exactly what you were mentioning here. So thank you very much again, Carlos, for setting the scene here. And I think that's an excellent basis now for Adrian and Michele just to take over here and to explain a little bit what is now really the topic all about with regard to crowding in private finance and what are the related expectations. So a little bit to transfer what Carlos has said into the concrete terms of what is expected under the topic. Adrian, Michele, would you like to take over and take the floor in this context?
Yes, so I think I'll start with the presentation, and Michele will do the second part. If we can move to the first slide. So I think, I mean, the objectives, I mean, we wanted to invite Carlos to speak first, just to show that this topic is really responding to the high policy needs from the Commission to implement private finance for energy efficiency. And so I'm not going to redo his presentation, but basically we really need to upscale private investments in energy efficiency and in small-scale renewables. And what I think Carlos has really highlighted is we need to work on the mobilization of the private capital. So there are public funds. We know that there is currently a lot of public grants available, but that will not be sufficient. And so this topic is really looking at how we can use private funds and in many cases use public funds as a catalyst and change the regulatory framework, the policy framework to allow private capital to be mobilized for investments in sustainable energy. Just a quick point of vocabulary. When we talk about sustainable energy, please don't understand that as just PV panels. It is rather meant to be understood as energy efficiency and small-scale renewables. And here the focus really has to be on energy efficiency. It's okay to have renewables also, but the proposals need to address the specific point of energy efficiency, because this is where we see difficulties in accessing finance due to the specificities of investments in energy efficiency. Okay, next slide. So the scope this year is so this is a topic that was offered last year. Last year we had two scopes. The second scope was on mainstreaming sustainable energy in the financial sector. This year we are opening only one scope. So the scope is really focused, like last year, on setting up innovative financing schemes. A few things that are important to understand is you need to implement, so the focus of proposals is really delivering an innovative financing scheme, which is operational at the end of the project. So within usually a 3 years time, you need to be able to deliver something which is operational, which is ready to finance investments. You don't have to implement the investments. You don't have to sign investment contracts during the time of the project, but it might make sense in order to have a pilot testing, because, you know, at the end of 3 years, if you only have something that's available on paper, that's not going to be very convincing. And here I'm talking about how you prepare a proposal. Well, in order to be convincing, pilot testing might be relevant in order to show that your financing scheme will be ready. In terms of location, financing schemes need to be implemented in at least one country, meaning you have to have a partnership of 3 countries, but you can work in only one country if that's what makes sense to your proposal. If you're working in only one country, you need to show a clear ambition to expand or to replicate or to transfer this experience to other countries during the time of the project. So really engaging with other countries. And then in terms of, well, eligible countries is the same as the whole call. So EU 27 plus the associated countries which are listed in the call document. And the EU funding per project is up to 1.75 million. Of course, if you think that your project requires a higher or a lower amount, that's absolutely justified. Then please go for it. This is only an indicative amount. Next slide, please. So, to be honest, what do we mean exactly by innovative financing schemes? I think it's a good question that I would ask if I was seeing this call topic. I think, you know, coming back to what Carlos was saying earlier, there's a mismatch really between the demand and the supply of private finance for sustainable energy investments. So investment size is not what investors are looking for. The costs for due diligence are too high. There's risks which are linked to either the technology, because in many cases, investors, bankers don't really understand how energy efficiency works. It's easy to know how much energy you're going to sell with a PV panel. It's much more difficult to say how much you're going to sell with insulation. So the energy you don't consume is not the same as the one that you're producing, even though it's creating revenues. Things like this make it difficult. Investment size also, we're talking usually on energy efficiency about small investments. And that means every time there's a lot of paperwork to be done for small investments. We have issues with levels of returns which are expected, the duration of investments for payback, and so on and so forth. So overall, it's not that there's a lack of finance. There's a lot of investors, there's a lot of financial actors who are ready, who are looking for projects to invest in. And on the other hand, there's a lot of people on the ground who are looking for money to implement their projects in energy efficiency, whether we're talking residential renovation, whether we're talking about companies, all sectors, there's a need for that. The financing schemes that we're talking about is exactly the place where we want to make the demand and the supply for finance match. And so that once we have a way that they match, then we can finance at a large scale. So what is really important to understand here is we want proposal not only to address the supply of finance, or not only to address the development of a pipeline of projects, but it's really to have activities which look at structuring both sides of the market and making them match. So if you're interested in developing an investment pipeline only, and the financing for that is a pretty straightforward scheme, then probably project development assistance makes more sense. But here we really want to have something which looks, and it's not looking just at how you will finance, it's also looking at, well, how do we get projects into this financing scheme? So it's really, you have to look at both sides, I think. What do we mean by innovative now? I mean, innovative can mean very many things. This is not a research program. So what we're looking for is something that is going further than what is already available at the local or the national level or in a specific sector, which means also if it's working in one country and you do it in a country where it doesn't exist, that qualifies as innovative. If you're doing it in a sector where it's new, but it exists in other sectors, that's also innovative. So what we want is really to just change the practice in specific sectors or specific countries. Innovative here means also, well, using private finance. And in many cases, it will not be just private finance because, I mean, as Carlos was saying, there's also a lot of public support available. And it doesn't mean you need to get rid of that public support and operate completely with private finance. But it's in many cases, it will be combining private finance with public support, which could be non-reimbursable grants, but also on capital expenses, but which could be also on technical assistance, on risk sharing, and so on. And yeah, I mean, I think you don't need to be, a first of a kind. Replicating what has been done, and we have been taking into account that we have been funding this topic since 2013 in different manners. So there's a lot of previous projects which have tested financing manners, financing schemes. Have a look at what has been financed under Live CET and under Horizon 2020 energy efficiency, because there's a lot of learnings that can be done. And it's okay to actually, start from that and improve it, replicate it, adapt it, and so on. Next slide, please. Concretely, what are we talking about when we're talking about financing schemes? And you can see that the topic has this very long list. Why we put this list is because, well, it clarifies also the kind of things that we're expecting. So, it could be many things. You could be preparing a financing scheme which allows for investments in equity or in debt, mezzanine. Blending with non-reimbursable grants is clearly an option, as I mentioned. Looking at the de-risking part, that would also qualify as an innovative financing scheme. How do you de-risk? How do you reduce the level of risk for investors on energy efficiency investments? Guarantees, risk sharing, insurance make a lot of sense. They are needed, they are asked for by many financial actors. Then looking into the concrete contractual mechanisms, a lot of things revolving around energy services, energy performance contracting, and the various variants that there are. So energy service agreements and so on. This also makes a lot of sense in this topic if you're considering to apply that. We're also identifying as potential schemes the ones where you stop attaching the debt to the person who owns the building or the company, and you attach it to the meter, or you attach it to the building. If you attach it to the meter, it's called on-bill finance. If you attach it to the building, it's called on-tax or home-based finance, depending how this is implemented. But these are financing schemes which are starting to be piloted in Europe. And if you're planning to expand on that, then this is welcome under this topic. The financing schemes you might propose here can be complementing already existing facilities for technical assistance. We are funding a lot of one-stop shops for home renovation, for public building renovation. It makes a lot of sense to complement that with specific financing schemes. One-stop shops look more at how to develop the pipelines of investments, how to make sure that the needs of the building owner are taken care of. But to complement that with financing makes a lot of sense. You could also propose financing schemes that look into refinancing. So securitization of financial assets based on energy efficiency and renewables to put them on the secondary market. Could be the issuance of green bonds, for example. You could look also into the development of local investment structures. And that could include, in particular, citizen financing and crowdfunding and energy communities, if the topic is really to develop that for energy efficiency. The use of market-based instruments, which have been existing for many years now, so carbon finance, energy efficiency obligations, mobilizing that for investments in energy efficiency is always something that would be very welcome here. And then, again, in terms of how this is working, well, a lot of the activities could revolve around brokering, matchmaking, aggregating small projects in order to make them more financeable, and generally, facilitating the match of demand and supply. So that's a bit what we mean by financing schemes. Next slide. Now, what would make a good proposal? If you're here, I assume it's because you're interested in preparing a proposal. First point is to analyze the market. Your proposal should target a specific region or specific regions and sectors. Be clear. Don't say that you're addressing buildings. Buildings is a very broad topic. So be very clear. If you're addressing SMEs, well, in what sector? For what reason? So describe that. Quantify the market potential. Explain what is the current status of the market. So if there are ongoing programs at the national or regional level, explain what is going on and how you will be complementing that. Be clear in identifying, who are the key actors. There's no such thing as companies. There's no such thing as investors. There are many different categories under that word. So be clear on that. And then once you have, described well and quantified the market, I explain what are the needs and what are the barriers to investments in energy efficiency. What are the constraints of the actors that you're targeting? And really be clear on how your proposal will answer those needs and those barriers, because this is exactly why we are putting EU public money into a proposal like yours, is because it answers a need that will not happen just with private money. And then I would say a really key point here is your concept for financing investments. We receive a lot of proposals which are, which have good ideas, but don't go sufficiently into the details. Your proposal needs to be detailed on how you're going to finance investments. Of course, you cannot know everything from the start, but it has to be concrete, sufficiently concrete to be credible. Your proposal will be assessed by 3 external experts who work on financing investments in energy efficiency. They need to get sufficient meat to be convinced that you will be able to deliver, even though, and if you don't know everything, that's fine. But make sure that you clarify it and you say, well, in the course of the project, this is what we will need to clarify, because this is what makes it credible. When you're developing the concept, and this is specifically a part of the application form, you need to demonstrate the business case. It doesn't have to be It's not something, the business case is not something you do at the very end of the project. It's something you need to already have a first idea of what would be the business case, demonstrate that it makes sense financially. You know, it's back of the envelope calculations, but still they need to be there from the start. And again, demonstrate that this will complement existing schemes, because we know that not everything is happening through EU-funded projects. We know there's a lot of things happening at the national and regional level. So really demonstrate how you will complement that. Next slide. What makes a good proposal still? Well, ensure market acceptance. This is, as I said, this is not a research topic. You need to be working with market actors throughout the development of the financing scheme. So it's not about a lab work, desk study, feasibility study, that at the end of the project, you have a presentation to market actors and you hope that this financing scheme will work. What we want is that from the start, you involve your future users, the investors, the project developers, the project hosts, the ESCOs, you name it. They need to be involved from the start in order to ensure that what you're doing is corresponding to the market needs. So identify who's key for the success of your project and engage with them from the start. And demonstrate support. You know, you have the possibility to provide letters of support. Well, of course, this is where you can demonstrate that you have already support, that you're in touch with the right people. And then last point, credibility. And here I'm bridging to Michele's presentation, which is coming next, which is on quantifying your activities. You know, be clear on what you're going to do and quantify the results of your activities. And I will now hand over to Michele to present on the impacts.
Thank you, Adrian. Indeed, if we talk about demonstrating the credibility, impacts and indicators are very important for your proposal. And in general, I will go through slides which were presented also in the plenary session, but we think it's worth presenting here too. So in general, you need to take into account and demonstrate how the results of your project will contribute to the expected impact. So this needs to be very clear in your proposal. And you will have three different kind of indicators. So you see them in the green shape on the right. So you have project-specific indicators, topic-specific indicators, and common indicators, which are common to the LIFE CET subprogram. So if we go to the next one, the project-specific indicators are really tailored to the impacts of your specific action. So you have to propose them, basically, because your action has a specific objectives. And with those indicators, you will demonstrate the achievement of those objectives. Then the topic itself suggests and establishes some topic-specific indicators. So they're also very important, essential, I would say. But of course, we don't expect that you address all of them, but you have to address only those which are relevant depending on the objectives of your action. And then there are the common indicators, which are the energy-related indicators, so energy savings, renewable generation, greenhouse gases reduction, and investments. They should be addressed as appropriate because they are common to all the topics. So in the next slide. So when proposing your impacts and indicators, and we see many proposals which unfortunately start very well, but are weak in this part, because they should present the starting point of their assumption. They should present how the proposed activities are really triggering the indicators, and they have to demonstrate a clear link between those activities, the results, and the impacts. So in general, you have to quantify the impacts for the project duration, so at project end value, and also beyond the project duration until 5 years afterwards. I don't enter now into the details of the differences because we are running out of time. But if we go to the next slide, we can have a look at the topic-specific indicators for the PrevaFin topic. As said, the project-specific indicators are essential and to make your project credible, and you have to propose them. The topic-specific indicators, you have to use the ones suggested in the text. Indeed, as a suggestion, you don't have to use all of them, but you have to use the ones which are relevant for your activities. And here you see there are a number of indicators which are relevant for the concept we discussed. So the number of investors and the project developers using the financing scheme, the investment projects, process or covered, the volume of investment, the number of households and businesses benefiting from the financing scheme, and of course, the investment in sustainable energy, the investment in particular in building energy renovation, and the percentage of energy savings targeted by the investment project. So in the next two slides, there are some relevant examples from past projects. You are encouraged to use them as a reference because they are ongoing or past projects which were successful, and they, of course, help you to exemplify some of the concepts which we discussed before. So in particular, we will have the opportunity to hear from the Smarter for You project, which is rolling out a green home and green mortgage mechanism. In the residential sector, we also have other examples, such as Inspire Renov. There's a financing scheme for home renovation in Bulgaria. We have projects working on the development of the energy efficient mortgage initiative, projects working such as Renon-Bill on bill financing, as discussed. And if we go to the non-residential sector, so in the next slide, also here we have a number of projects which are working on private equity and mezzanine financing in Central and Eastern Europe, working on energy savings insurance mechanism for SMEs, energy efficient equipment as a service, so leasing, for instance, for industrial SMEs, projects working on financing schemes for energy cooperatives and energy communities, or projects which developed IT framework for valuation and benchmarking of sustainable energy projects, which it's now hosted by Sustainable Energy Finance Association mentioned by Carlos. And then last but not least, it's a refinancing cycle through the sale of receivables from energy efficiency services in 10 countries. We also have upcoming projects. They are in preparation. That's the last slide. Again, you see that the themes approached are the energy efficient mortgages, financing scheme for energy efficiency and renewables in 3 cities in Ukraine, crowdfunding for investments in the business sector, in particular supermarkets in Italy, and basketball mechanism for SMEs in the wood, furniture, and nautical sectors in Italy and Croatia. So that's the last slide of the presentation, and then I hand over to Bjorn for continuing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you, Andrea and Michele. You have provided quite a comprehensive set of details on what is expected on regarding the topic crowding in of private finance. And I could imagine that there might be even some questions now popping up slowly to the audience. And again, in this context, before we move on, I would like to remind you that you can use Slido to post these questions, and we will take them up at the end to be answered then by the right person on the panel. But before we do so, I would say then it's time now to move from, let's say, from theory to practice, I would say. And we are super happy that we have Monica Ardeliano here. And I would like you to ask you whether you are ready to take the floor to present us the project Smarter EU, to give us a very concrete examples of experiences with practical innovative financing projects, and maybe also a few words on the challenges that you have encountered. Monica, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm glad to share with you our experience. We applied for Life Clean Energy Transition Program with Smarter Finance for EU project. I am the project coordinator representing Romania Green Building Council. Next slide, please. Just a brief history. So the project is implementing green homes and green mortgage programs. Everything started back in 2007 when Romania Green Building Council had a pilot test on green home certification. Then we started to work with other green building councils. In 2014, we had launched our green mortgage program, having a first bank in Romania interested to finance green homes. And we applied in 2018 for Horizon 2020 project that we had with a consortium implemented from May 2019 till November 2021. And then we reapplied for the LIFE program in 2022. We won, and we started this project in June last year, which will end in May 2025. Next slide, please. But what is a green mortgage? So what is this project about? It's about a partnership between a certifier, us for example, or another green building council, working closely with energy auditors, which is partnering with a project developer, with an investor that wants to differentiate on the market and comes with better residential projects that are environmentally friendly and also have less energy costs for the home buyers. In the same time, we have a partnership with a participating bank that is offering a discounted mortgage to the units that are certified by us as green homes. We are offering the guarantee to the bank that units are meeting the criteria for environmental performance and energy performance, and they are also eligible for green finance because they are aligned with EU taxonomy. In the same time, we have the fourth important stakeholder of this agreement, the home buyer, which is actually the main beneficiary because they have better homes that are also healthier, they have reduced energy costs, and they can afford to invest more in energy efficiency by buying a green home. Next slide, please. Which are the criteria, the green criteria that we are taking in consideration? The unusual suspects, of course, the most important, energy efficiency, but also green energy. We also look at construction waste mitigation, indoor air quality, sustainable and healthy materials, location, is that residential project walkable, bioclimatic design, and so on. Next slide, please. These are the results of the previous initiative, Smarter, and also represents in blue all the countries involved in the replication of the successful green homes and green mortgage programs. We have right now 17 green homes and green mortgage programs launched or in development. The total value of the project certified as green, it's more than 10 billion euros right now, representing over 37,000 homes. And through the two projects, we conducted extensive research and developed tools for the financial institutions. Next slide, please. The bank partners, so far we have 14 financial institutions that are offering green mortgages for green homes projects. Next slide, please. So Smarter Finance for You, what is bringing you this live project? Next slide, please. These are the partners. We have 9 partners from 7 countries. We are the coordinators and working closely with other 2 Green Building Councils, Irish Green Building Council and Green Building Council España, the Portuguese Energy Agency, the European Ukrainian Energy Agency. We also have another partner from Ukraine, the Association of Energy Cities of Ukraine, Habitat for Humanity, and I'm here today also with our partner Eva Meirenheim from Habitat for Humanity, which will join the question and answer session. Enersafe Capitals, our experts on financial services, and Passive Up House Temple Media, our communication expert. Next slide, please. So which will be the impact of Smarter for EU? We will focus on creating hybrid finance solutions for vulnerable people. This is a work package that is coordinated actually by Habitat for Humanity. The creation of a European Center of Excellence, which will represent a hands-on assistance center for banks, investors, developers, green home solution providers, and citizens. Capacity building, especially for the financial institutions, and of course we will increase the energy security, mainly taking into consideration the situation in Ukraine, and we have 2 Ukrainian partners. As you said before, it's very important to leverage the public investment and promote this rapid implementation of innovative green finance solution. Next slide, please. So this is represents the new portal that we developed. We have an interim version that was already launched, the European Center of Excellence portal of Smarter Finance for EU. Right now we have basic information for the essential key stakeholders. We have listed the new existing partners. The full portal will be ready in June. And we will add more research materials. We will develop the registry of all the residential projects, and we'll have also a self-survey functionality for the stakeholders in order to educate them on the benefits of joining this program. As we said, this is a portal and that is dedicated to banks, investor developers, green home solution providers, municipalities, but also home buyers, citizens, the most important stakeholder. The component, there is also another component of the European Center of Excellence. We will create a new legal entity, a new association that will represent the program across Europe. Next slide, please. So this is the target, 100 billion euros. This is an ambitious target that we have, but we are confident that we will reach it. As I said, we are working with different green building councils and key organizations around Europe. So we are very confident that will be reached. So next slide, please. Some recommendations from our side for successful application. Next slide, please. First question that we put ourselves was, would we do this project without this funding? And the answer was yes, because we had a successful program in Romania, successful green homes and green mortgage program, and we were sure that can be implemented even without the funding. Of course, when we've heard about the funding, we are happy to see that this program can be replicated in other countries more easily. We can conduct more research and we can engage more stakeholders. So of course it helped a lot, but the most important thing was the fundamental belief that that project will be successful with or without the funding. Second recommendation is to select the partners very carefully and clearly define their roles and the significant value that they will add. We had experts for energy efficiency finance, from green building performance, impact calculation, energy poverty, vulnerable persons, communication, and training for financial institutions. So through our partners, we cover all these key areas. So this is very, very important because you will work with the partners during the project. So it's very good to have the right partners on your side with very defined value. Next recommendation was to keep it as simple as possible, but not simpler. That said, I would say in a project, we know we have many partners, we have many deliverables, milestones, tasks. What is important is to make the structure as simple as possible and don't lose in too many details. I'm gonna share with you an example of how we structure our project. Next slide, please. So we have, as you see here, so the project coordination, which is transversal, work package 1, work package 2, the European Center of Excellence, which is the main outcome of this project, and the tool creation, alignment and governance, capacity building and policy advocacy, hybrid green finance tools for vulnerable citizens, or feeding the Center of Excellence, and also in the same time, the sustainability dissemination and exploitation of the project. And of course, don't forget communication and awareness building. So this is how we structure. This is just an example that I wanted to share with you to tell you that it's very important to keep it as simple as possible. Another recommendation is regarding the letter of support, was already mentioned by Adrian, but some could think it's not so critical, but actually it's very important. It's very important to engage the key stakeholders as early as possible. Before you plan to write the proposal and ask their support, this letter of support, because it takes a lot of time. And if they are engaged from the proposal stage, they are willing to support you during the project even more. So the project will be successful. And as we said, it's about market engagement. It's not so much about research. So we need to have the key stakeholders with us. Another recommendation, I think, yes, is to be a beneficiary before being a coordinator. So we've been beneficiaries of other EU projects before taking the role of coordinator, because you get experience, you get into the complexity of a EU project, and you understand, you learn a lot of things. So it's very important, this aspect, to join as a beneficiary of a consortium before taking the role of a coordinator. And I think this was the last recommendation that I had. Yeah, and one more would be, and this is probably something that, yes, is a lesson learned from our application: balance your work across the whole proposal, because if you focus too much on some aspects, you'll run out of time, and you could focus less on some other important parts of the proposal. So yes, have always in mind the whole project when you apply. Thank you so much. These are my contacts, and I said I'm here with Eva from Habitat for Humanity, and we are happy to answer to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Very interesting indeed. I think it's always very, very, fruitful. And for all of us, when we get the feedback directly from the market, what does it mean? What is conceived more in theoretical terms? If you take it up and bring it to the market, and which kinds of challenges are you facing in this context? And therefore, we are super happy to have you here in this context, also to be available for any questions that might be there still from the audience of potential proposers who are now considering to draft something like you have done done a few years ago. And this is the keyword question. So I would now like to come back to the pre-announced questions and answers session. As mentioned at the beginning, please send your questions if you have not done yet through the website, either by using the hashtag, the EULive22, or also by using the QR code, which was briefly on the screen. Maybe it could be put back. Exactly. Thank you very much. We will now try to dedicate the rest of this webinar to answering any questions that you might have. Should we run out of time, we would then also try to answer any questions that you could pose also to our functional mailbox. The email address was briefly shown on the last slide of Adrian's and Michele's presentation, and it will put on the website afterwards as part of the recording of the slides. You can also afterwards contact, of course, for any questions, your national contact point, and the list of these national contact points is available on the CINEA page, which is dedicated to the live program. But now it's time to come to the questions, and may I ask the back office more or less to put up the questions that we have so far, and we will try now to be very efficient and to answer as much as possible. The first question that I see here on the slide is the budget allocated really commensurate to the ambitious targets? Could the cut budget be increased in the future? So I suppose that is a question maybe even either to Adrien or also to Carlos, if he is still there, who is a bit for the programming of the whole program.
Maybe I'll start answering on at the project level. I mean, if you're talking about the 1.75 million euro target budget, as I said, this is indicative. And we've had in the past projects with higher budget that were selected successfully. If you demonstrate that what you're going to do costs more than the indicative budget, and that it actually has also a higher impact and so on, and that's this is a defendable case. In terms of the increasing the budget for the topic, I mean, maybe just a quick mention that this topic doesn't fund the hardware investments. So we're only talking about the creation of the fund, but not financing the investments themselves. But Carlos, over to you.
Yes. Yes. No. Many thanks, Adrian. No, I mean, on as regards the budget, I mean, yeah, it's a bit what it is mentioned there. I mean, there is of course public budgets can do a part, while the rest we need to do through private financing. Business case and the economic case is there for any efficiency. It is not for other measures, but it is for any efficiency. But it's also true that things has to be done properly. And as I mentioned during my intervention, there is a need to be efficient and to be effective when deploying any efficiency solutions. This is clear. Yeah, whether the budget could be or not increased in the future. I mean, the way it works in the EU budget at least, and well, of course, member states they have as well individual specific approaches in the member states. For the EU budget, it works normally through multi-annual financial frameworks. So far in the last frameworks has been always based on 7 years. So previous one was 14-20. We are now in the 21-27. And the next one will be post 2028. And this is where basically the union decides on their priorities and specifically on the different programs and how the different policy measures will be financed. So while, of course, I mean, the budget can be increased in the future, can be. That's a possibility that will pretty much depend on the discussions on the next MFF. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlos. I think we can take at least 2 questions quite quickly because I think they were briefly mentioned in the presentation. Maybe that was not completely clear. One is, can innovative financing schemes be proposed which only address renewable energy investments? And is it necessary to deliver investments by the end of the project? Maybe Michele, you want to take these 2?
Yes. For the first one, I mean, the quick answer would be no, because there should be a specific focus on energy efficiency that is mentioned very clearly in the topic. And for the one on the delivery investment by the end of the project, again, no, it's not necessary. It is necessary to deliver the innovative financing schemes, which are operational and ready to finance the investments, but that can happen beyond the project duration.
Thank you, Michele. Then is maybe quite interesting question, which I think was already touched upon also, which has a theoretical and a practical component, I would say. Do we need to include banks in the consortium? I mean, there is the theoretical component. Is this required in the topic? That goes to you, Adrian. But the practical question would go to Monica. Does it make sense to include them?
Yeah, maybe I mean, from the program side, you don't have to include banks in the consortium. You don't have to include investors. There are many ways to include people in your activities, to include stakeholders in your activities. It can be to involve them directly in the proposal. In some cases, it makes full sense. And we've had successful projects where the banks are really part of the consortium and are active. But in many cases, you don't work with only one bank and you don't want to have 20 banks involved in your consortium. That would be a bit of a nightmare, probably. And so it's more about how you're going to involve them in your activities. And maybe I can hand over to Monica to tell us a bit about this.
Right, Adrian. Yes, so we didn't involve banks in our consortium. We didn't involve investors. There are many ways to engage them. As we said, we had letters of support of many banks. That's true. They were part of the discussion from an early stage of the proposal. They were supportive, but as we said, they were not beneficiaries like direct beneficiaries and part of the consortium. They were beneficiaries of the results of this project.
Thank you, Monica. We have another question here. Also, this I think was briefly touched upon already in the presentation, but I think it's interesting also to answer it once again. Can we use the grant to provide the seed capital for a guarantee fund, which is supposed to be set up? I don't know, maybe Adrien, once again, before we come to the impact, which I will give to Michele. I warn you.
Well, the answer is no. So this would not be an eligible cost. So the eligible costs broadly are staff cost or travel, any kind of purchase, travel, subcontracting that you need. It could be equipment, but we would only take the depreciation and I mean, the idea is not to fund the hardware investments here, but seed capital would not be an eligible fund. So the proposal should, the activities should basically allow you to find the seed capital for your guarantee fund and to dimension it and to create it, but we would not fund the guarantee fund itself.
Thank you, Adrian. The impact question. Impact that's already going to the assessment of the proposal, and I can understand that this is very important for you as potential proposers. Impact has a particular weight in the assessment, rightly said 1.5. What is the most important impact that needs to be demonstrated, Michele? Can we say something in this context?
I don't think there is something such as the most important impact. I would say the impact part needs to be clear, needs to be credible, needs to be ambitious. In particular, it has to be very clear the demonstration on how the results of the project, the activities and the results of the project will contribute to the impacts. As said during the presentation, for us, it is essential that the proposal use project-specific indicators, and that's proposed by them, so we cannot indicate them, and also use as much as possible topic-specific indicators if they are relevant for the activities that are proposed. I see Adrian wants to add something.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of the KPI, there's no prioritization that's clear. What is really key is if you read the topic text, it clearly says that when you're writing a proposal, you need to demonstrate how basically the money that we're going to give you will deliver an innovative financing scheme or several which are operational and which are ready to finance investments, and that this will have an impact on investment. This is really the key impact. And the indicators are a proxy to demonstrate that. And they can be, and we highlight the topic-specific ones, which are the same because we think most of the proposals actually fit in there. But you can have also more specific ones, which we can't basically imagine because we don't have your proposal. But yeah, I think the really important strategic one is really delivering something that changes what's happening in terms of investments.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. The last question that I see here is tackles again the question of the regional impact to a certain extent, I understand, or possibly on the other hand also the regional diversity which is needed for a consortium. Maybe it's important to once again separate and differentiate that once again. I don't know who wants to take it. I look Adrien or Michele. I would be happy with both of you.
Well, I mean, I explained that earlier, but basically you need to have, your proposal needs to include 3 participants from 3 eligible countries. The implementation of the financing scheme doesn't have to be in 3 countries. It needs to be in at least 1 country. It can't be less. And if you're working in only 1 country, you need to also demonstrate how you can, communicate and enable replication in other countries. But in terms of the beneficiaries, the consortium, it has to be at least 3 countries participating.
Thank you very much. I think very clear. That brings us to the very end, I would say, of this session, perfectly in time. So we managed the time extremely well without even planning too much on that and having to moderate a lot in this context. Just before closing, a few words. The recording, as for all the sessions, also the recording of this session, will be available soon on the CINEA website. Please also remember that you have the possibility in principle to use the B2 Match platform to set up one-to-one meetings with other interesting potential applicants. This gives you an opportunity to get in touch with them and with other organizations across Europe, and maybe also to get in touch with them with a view to setting up a good consortium with different members for a successful proposal. You also can see that my colleague had already in Slido set up or give you the opportunity to vote for the satisfaction poll. So we really would be interested in getting better in the future and therefore also getting your opinion on how the session was, what you were missing and what was good in this context. So please take a few minutes to give us your opinion on the Slido or through Slido and the polls there. Yeah, having said that, thank you very much to all of you, to the whole audience, to be with us today, and of course also to the speakers for all their excellent presentations. Last but not least, yeah, we are looking forward to you now, to the audience and your successful applications, and we would be happy to receive them and look at them. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.